Hello, welcome to Boston Climate Week. I am Julia Reisman from the Center for Ecotechnology, CET, but I am here as part of Resilient Valley to share with you the story of Resilient Valley and how we came together as a group in response to millions of dollars of federal funding loss. We are going to have an opportunity to share with you a little bit about the coalition that came together. So, next slide. In March of 2025, um, the federal government announced millions of dollars of pulling back on federal grants to climate organizations all across the country, as well as other radical changes to how the federal government responded to community organizations and local problems. In Western Massachusetts, a coalition of well, it wasn't a coalition at the time. It was a loosely knit or a group of development directors and executive directors who got together for potlucks of mutual support and listening to each other. And we've been meeting together for about a year and a half. When we got together in March of 2025, we realized that just in our very small group of folks, there was already $3 million of federal funds that had been pulled away from climate work in our community. And the look on our faces, we were just so distressed and concerned about what that would mean for our communities, for our organizations, how we would cope, and more importantly, how would we reach out and talk to our donors about showing up for the lost programs. So some of the organizations that were in that potluck included the um, uh, Grow Food Northampton and the Kestrel Land Trust, the Hitchcock Center, and um, and we in this conversation came from a place of despair, distraught, um, and panic. And we, in the midst of that conversation, had a shift of realizing that we would be stronger together if we coalesced as we had in the past around shared fundraising and a shared vision for what a resilient community would look like. We would never be able to necessarily replace the funds we lost, but if we could come together and convene around a coherent story, we felt like there was a way that we could engage donors that was more about showing up with abundance in this moment of need than giving to any one particular one of our organizations. That if we continued to put forth a climate resilient vision for the future and to engage with donors around what that might look like, we'd be stronger together than ripped apart by this moment in history. From that came the beginning steps of what is now known as Resilient Valley. And we have just on May 2nd concluded our very first joint fundraising campaign. In this session, we're going to explain to you what we did, why we did it, and what we learned. Um, but let's see. Is it make sense, Laura, for us to do the poll, or should we move into the next section based on who's here right now? You're muted, Laura.
You think we'd be better at this after 6 years, 7 years, whatever it is, but here we are. So let me launch the poll. It's just a really quick three questions for everybody because we want to figure out who's in the room.
There are three questions here, so go ahead and scroll down if you don't see questions two and three. And then you submit it when you're done with all three questions. And my co-presenters, please make sure you fill out the survey as well. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to I'm going to share the results. So everybody here in the room today is a nonprofit leader or staff of a nonprofit. What is your familiarity with donor advised funds? So we have half of you are really familiar. Some of you don't know very much. So we've got a range there as well. And then 100% of everybody in the room does not have a donor advised fund.
Great. So thank you very much. I mean, the reason why we ask those introductory questions is that as you continue to learn from this session, you're going to hear more about donor advised funds and how we use those as an opportunity to fundraise and engage our community. Um, and I do want you to understand for just a moment that what we did in Western Massachusetts, this small group of nonprofit organizations to come together, was in response to this moment of loss of funding. But there's some remarkable things that happened that we learned along the way. We're going to be sharing some of those vignettes with you, if you will, some testimonials of what we learned as we came together, as we did some joint fundraising together, and why we feel like it's really beneficial to tell this story. Next, we're going to go into a session where we're going to hear from the National Half My DAF campaign, which was the model we used to coalesce around and run a campaign. We'll announce our campaign results and we'll tell you what next and how to think about how this could be replicated in other communities, but also how we could engage more energy into Western Massachusetts for climate resiliency. So at this point, I'd like to call on Billy to give your point of view of what we learned from Resilient Valley.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Billy Spitzer. I'm the director of the Hitchcock Center for the Environment in Amherst. And we were one of the institutions that lost federal funding last year. And we're really kind of staring into this abyss of, what do we do? And I think one of the things that was so helpful about coming together in this coalition is we're in a fairly small community in Western Mass, and there's a pretty limited number of donors, especially major donors, that often are giving to multiple organizations. And we were really trying to figure out how do we help people understand like this is the time to dig deep and give, and to not get paralyzed by being overwhelmed. We know that every organization was suffering in one form or another, and so by coming together and really sharing some joint messaging and communication, and really repeating this mantra about this is a time to really focus on community and generosity. That was really effective, I think, in kind of cutting through kind of the noise and the panic of the time. And another thing I think that was really interesting is, thinking back a year ago, it was a time when it felt like a lot of our organizational values were being challenged. And it really, by working together, it felt like it enabled us much more easily to kind of stand up for our community and what our community values, and really start to engage people in thinking about, as Julie said, not just what we were losing, but how do we come together to create something better, and be more collaborative, unleash more generosity, unleash more collaboration. And the vehicle has been so far a lot through joint fundraising, but there's really a lot more potential there for other kinds of collaboration, and we're kind of excited about focusing on that next. And I think one of the lessons is, when times are tough, that's really the time to work together, not to try to retreat to your separate corners, even though that's kind of the instinct in a way. And also another thing that worked really well for us, I think, is just to be very transparent about what was at stake and what we were losing. And that's a very vulnerable position to be in, to talk about how your organization is losing funding, how it's struggling. But I think the response we got was really, really, really positive, and really unleashed a lot of action and collaborative spirit and generosity. So yeah, I think it was a, response in the moment, I think that was really good. But now we're seeing, months later, deeper relationships among our organizations, new opportunities for collaboration, and just the connective tissue among all the people that really helps sustain you when you're facing challenges.
Julie, that was really well said. Thank you. One of the interesting things about this campaign is even though there was a distinct coalition of organizations that worked to raise a pool of matching funds, that those matching funds were available to any nonprofit organization in Western Massachusetts, which a lot of folks were confused by. Why would a group of climate conservation, environmental organizations, food justice organizations, farming organizations come together um, and make available matching funds to any nonprofit? And the reason we were thinking is that we knew that our donors who loved conservation or loved the Hitchcock Center for its environmental education for children, we knew that they also loved their churches and the schools that they wanted to support, and that there were many causes they wanted to support. Our request to our donors in that moment was, yes, we are struggling as climate conservation environmental organizations, but so is the need out there. We just want you to be more generous. If you could give more generously to all the organizations you love, now's the time to do it. And there's these pools of matching funds. So I want to turn it next to Cassandra to talk about your experience from this campaign.
Thanks, Julia. And I echo everything that Billy said. So I'm Cassandra Burns. I'm the development manager at the Conway School for Landscape Design here in Northampton, which is a small independent master's program in ecological design. And through the program, our students work on a series of community projects addressing real challenges related to climate change and the environment in communities across New England, but predominantly here in Western Massachusetts. And on those projects, we are working with real communities and nonprofit partners to identify those challenges and implement the projects and design the plans that will be hopefully implemented by the communities down the road. And what we found is while we were not directly impacted by the funding cuts, all of our partners were. And so suddenly these communities that were relying on state and federal funding to address these really huge challenges, whether it's flooding and needing to figure out how they're going to relocate their town to get away from the rivers, or if it's food security, or Billy touched on farming and some of the other challenges that this region is facing, they don't have the resources anymore to deal with these challenges. And we maintained our commitment to support them pro bono and make sure that communities are getting access to that critical design expertise that they need to be able to move their plans forward and really plan for a resilient future. And I think, being a part of this campaign, I first learned about it in November when the first round was really getting started, and was participating as a nonprofit seeking a match through the lottery. And of course, the initial draw was the financial component of it, and knowing that any lottery winnings that we were lucky enough to receive would be channeled back into the communities that we're serving, allowing us to work with more communities and be more generous with our time and our resources to help them address those challenges. Which in its own right is an amazing reason to be a part of this. But I think what really stood out to me after getting together for the community lunch was seeing just this incredible group of people who are all dedicated to the same things and who are mission aligned, who have a strong vision for what they want this valley to look like, and who are willing to dedicate their own time and resources to make that happen. And I think from all of the work I've done in climate and other challenges over the course of my career, what has become apparent is that these challenges need local solutions, and that we have the power as communities to find those solutions. And watching Resilient Valley come together and build on that foundation for me was the most rewarding part and what I personally am most excited about moving forward. I think it's incredible that they've been able to mobilize as much funding as they have to support nonprofits across Western Massachusetts. But more than anything, what they're doing is bringing disparate groups together to address these challenges hand in hand, which is something that nobody else is really doing, at least in this part of the state. And it's tremendously cool to be a part of. So thanks for joining us all today. Back to you, Julia.
Wow. Man, I just loved hearing that. I didn't know what you were going to talk about. That's incredible. It's so nice to hear. So I remember at that lunch when we were gathered that Laura was there from the Peace Development Fund. It was the first time I'd ever met her. And there was a suggestion you put out to the group, which was maybe we could model a joint fundraising effort after Half My Daft, this national campaign that you were familiar with. So I'm going to turn it over to you for just a minute, and we will be hearing from the national Half My Daft. Is going to explain some of this language we're using, like DAF and matching funds and lotteries, and all this is going to become known to you. But I hope what you're getting right now is that what we learned is that through joint fundraising was not about the dollars raised. It was about convening each other. It was about reaching out and engaging donors about a story of giving in this moment. It was about sharing resources and knowledge and experience with one another. The convening, the collaborating, the sharing of information made us individually, from my own experience, more resilient because we looked forward to working together. We looked forward to our shared work, and to doing something beneficial, and for reaching out to so many nonprofits in our local area. So, Laura, I'm going to turn it over to you to give your perspective, and then we're going to hear from our national Half My Daft folks.
Thank you, Julia. And thank you, everybody, for joining us this afternoon. So Peace Development Fund is a national people-funded foundation that funds social justice work. And Corey from Grow Food Northampton had reached out to me after having gone to a event with funders it must have been February. And she was distressed because there were a number of foundations who were sort of saying, we're all going to keep doing what we've been doing. And it felt like a mismatch with what was happening in the world with funding cuts, with just the attacks from the new administration. So Corey and I talked a little bit, and we were just talking about, like, as a funder, what does my funder community have the ability to do? So I was excited to meet my development colleagues for lunch. We are as I said, people funded foundation, so we raise the money that we give out. So I'm, both a funder and a fundraiser, so walk in both worlds. And what it was really clear, and we were starting to hear from the organizations that we fund, is how important convening is and being able to bring people together in these shared moments. And that's a lot of what I saw when we got together in the lunch was how do we as organizations who have donors who are also feeling a little bit lost right now and not sure how they can navigate. And we know that donors have been very generous and that they were going to be asked a lot more. And so I think, we were looking for a way to do a dual collaboration that would both bring together the organization so that we can be stronger together, but also how do we knit that divide between donors and organizations, knowing that a lot of the donors are, it's not a mystery who is giving to what organization. We know that there's a lot of overlap on our list, and yet we pretend like oh, well, these are my donors and I don't want you to know who they are because it's somehow a secret. Um, so when we were kind of going like, what are we gonna do? And because Peace Development Fund also has donor advised funds and has worked with the the Half My DAF campaign, given that there's an extraordinary amount of wealth sitting in mostly the very large foundational DAFs, unleashing just a little bit of that generosity when stock markets are at an all-time high, um, felt like a way that we could bring people together. So I was honored to be invited in with the organizations that are just doing this incredible work on the ground and thinking about how we can raise all boats. So thank you, Julia. Thank you to Corey for bringing me along. And it's been honestly one of the biggest joys has been meeting every week with everybody and just getting to build relationships because that's how we build resilience is through relationships and deep relationships, not just like, hey, let's pass out business cards at an event.
All right, I'm going to turn it over to Elizabeth now to share her screen. She's going to explain what a DAF is and what Half My DAF campaign is and why it inspired us. Thank you for joining us, Elizabeth.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. Um, and thank you, Laura, for sharing just all the benefits that you all have received from doing your own Match My DAF campaign. It's very inspiring. Um, so I'm here to talk about Half My DAF, which is the national campaign. I am currently an impact associate at Brighton Jones, so it's a wealth management office. And as an associate, I am here to support our impact advisory team with empowering our clients to align their charitable resources with their values and passions. So Jen and David are one of our clients. They're the ones that had started Half My DAF. And so I'm just here as a part of their support system, helping spread the word about Half My DAF and hopefully helping them reach their goals and changing the landscape around donor advised funds through increasing DAF giving, and then also just having conversations like this with nonprofits about donor advised funds. So this is the typical kind of presentation that we usually give when we meet with nonprofits or like have webinars. So I won't be making it through the whole thing today, but I will go through some of these agenda items here, just starting off with, okay, what is a donor advised fund? Talking a little bit about how they work, why people open them, and then I can get into some of the mechanics of the program. So let's keep moving on here. So just starting off with a donor advised fund, the way I like to think about it is like it's a charitable checking account. So a client will open one and they'll make an irrevocable deposit into this account. The money that's held in a donor advised fund, it's invested and it grows over time. And something that's good to know about a DAF is that there is the tax benefit that you get up front. So someone, as soon as they put that money into the DAF, they'll get that tax break. Individuals will typically open a donor advised fund when they have a year with a significant amount of income. So if someone's maybe selling a business or they're selling a lot of stock, the contributions that they're putting into a DAF are pretty substantial. So it's a really kind of smart way to kind of space out your giving if you have a lot of charitable assets that you'd like to distribute. So there are three main kinds of DAFs. So they're the national funds, so that's like Fidelity Charitable, Vanguard, Schwab, that they have over 70% of the DAF assets in the US. And there are also community foundations, and then there are also single purpose DAFs. These are held at universities or other faith-based institutions. Something to know about these is while DAFs may be held at different institutions, the vehicle still is the same. Individuals put in money, they get the tax break after they have made that contribution. So here's where we get to this problem that we're hoping to solve here. So as of right now, according to the most recent updates or the DAF reports, there are $326 billion currently sitting in donor advised funds. And there are three structural things that are happening here that are causing the stopgap, why there's that big dollar amount just sitting there. So the individuals or individuals, the institutions that are holding on to these donor advised funds, they're making money off of the DAF. So there's no incentive for them to be moving money out of donor advised funds because they make money off of the percentage that is in the DAF, off of the fees. So that's why there's no urgency for donors to give because the institutions are not pushing their DAF holders to distribute funds from those accounts. So while there are also some of these structural barriers that prevent individuals from spending down money from their DAF, there are also a lot of very human barriers that make it challenging for someone to give and to engage in their DAF more regularly. So there are things like inertia, these DAFs, there's no timeline for when someone has to spend down their DAF. So, they'll just say like, oh, we'll deal with it later. I think Billy, you had mentioned that sometimes people are really overwhelmed by the amount of choice that they have and they don't know where to give or how to give most effectively. So they're overwhelmed by that complexity. And then perfection. Individuals want to give and give effectively and do it right. And they want to give to the nonprofit that they feel like is really going to be most effective in making the impact that they'd like to see out in the world. Some individuals see their DAF as an asset, even though this money is something that they're not going to get back. Some people still want to hold on to that DAF and see that high number. Individuals are really busy. It's hard to set aside some time to really look at your donor advised fund and make some decisions about how it is that you want to give. And then also individuals are just unsure. They don't always have, an impact advisory team like what we have at Brighton Jones to give them some advice on where to give and how much to give. So that brings me to half my DAF. So those are all the challenges that Jen and David had recognized. And this was our essentially solution to those challenges. So during COVID, Jen and David, they started Half My DAF. The story that they like to tell is that they were in their backyard and were, just talking about nonprofits and all the challenges that individuals are facing as far as securing funding. And they said, okay, what can we do about this? How can we get our community to step up and to give more? Which is really interesting. I know, Laura, you had kind of talked about, as a community, you're asking yourself very similar questions about how do we do more and how do we do that together? So their first step was that they created a pool of funding and they challenged their community to spend down their DAF. They provided some deadlines and then they also had this financial incentive of putting up, $2 million for individuals to submit their DAF grants and have the chance of getting a match. So from this chart that you can see here at the bottom, every year we've had more and more individuals participating in Half My DAF and submitting their funds for matches. So this is year over year how much money that we've been able to distribute from Half My DAF as far as individuals spending down their donor advised fund and the matches that we also distribute. So lots of DAF money moving. So now I'd like to just cover some of the mechanics of the program and how it works as far as on the national level. So on March 2nd of every year, we open up the form that we have online for individuals to submit their DAF grants. We challenge individuals, spend down half of your DAF, and we will start accepting your grant receipts on a rolling basis. So we're reviewing those from March 2nd until June 18th. On June 18th, that's our first round of matches. So we are randomly selecting nonprofits for a match. Those matches are dollar for dollar up to $5,000. And then we do one random selection for a nonprofit and match them at $25K. So after June 18th has surpassed, then we kind of go on to our second cycle where we continue taking more grants on a rolling basis. We're reviewing those, putting them on our website until our final deadline of October 8th, where we again do another random selection and match grants dollar for dollar up to $5,000 and have another 25K match. Something that I always remind individuals is that if your grants are not selected in that first round that I had mentioned on June 18th, the nonprofits that weren't selected are still eligible to receive a match on October 8th. So this is structurally very intentional because we want individuals to be, granting earlier on in the year to help, nonprofits with more stability and predictability as far as, what their funding is going to look like for this year. So that's why we have those two matching cycles. And then just to wrap up on my end, I wanted to just share some general details about the funding overview for 2026. So we have a little over 2.5 million in matching funds to give away. And that number is increasingly growing. We actually did get another $10,000 grant for the reproductive health pool. So I'm excited to share that that's continuing to grow. Any organization is eligible for a match from Half My DAF as long as they're, a registered 501(c)(3), and they can get a match from that $1 million pool of the general funding. It's also helpful for individuals or nonprofits that fit within these focus funds, such as reproductive justice, gender equity, and education, to be aware that if you are making an impact in that space, you have a higher chance of being selected for a match because we have some additional funding that can go towards those organizations. And that's kind of my general overview of Half My DAF, and I'm happy to answer if there are any questions about the program or how it's run differently than what it is that you all are doing in Massachusetts. So thank you, Julia.
That was great. Thank you. It was very helpful to have Half My DAF as our inspiration, and it became an organizing structure for us. So we ran a webinar in October to potential donors, friends, other nonprofits to test the water to see if there was interest in doing a joint fundraising campaign, to put out the model out there and to ask our community if this is something that we would want to do here locally. And that was the first time we put an effort out in terms of broadening the reach and putting out the message. At the end of October, that webinar, we did a poll and the answer was yes. So we had between October and December to pull together ourselves to run and launch a campaign on giving. Our first round was starting at Giving Tuesday for a lottery deadline of Groundhog's Day, February 2nd. So we had to put together the rules. We had to put together our first ever website. We had to come up with a name and a logo. And what was really fun, I thought was really fun, was that we put together a resource packet for community nonprofits to be able to start to talk to donors. We gave them sample emails, some sample social media posts that would allow folks to start to go and talk to donors, to ask them if they had a donor advised fund. The popularity of donor advised funds is just increasing at such a fast rate. When I first started at CET, we had 3 donor advised funds and gifts from donor advised funds, and we had no idea what it was or how to thank the donors or even how to put it as an entry in our donor database, let alone talk to them about their donor advised fund. So what was very interesting to me as a development director was upping the game in terms of knowing what this popular vehicle is and the courage to now go talk to all my donors, because there are donors who are giving small gifts as they always have done to organizations who set up donor advised funds, put it on the back burner, are not thinking about it, but could be giving more generously through their donor advised funds. And I did, in fact, unlock and unleash new donations that were more generous from donors who had donor advised funds but wasn't contributing to our organization using them. And what was more interesting was that they were so impressed that I would reach out and ask them to give to all the organizations they loved in our community, not just us. That I was sharing that language with them and giving them an opportunity to give to amplify their giving to organizations they were giving to anyways and have that be potentially doubled was a wonderful opportunity to connect with them as supporting the things that they are interested in. Uh, so I would like to now turn to the results of our Resilient Valley coalition. So at the end of the first round of matching funds, we organized a community-wide lunch. In light of it was a lunch, a potluck that brought us together in March of 2025. Let's have a community lunch for all the recipients who had either been nominated for a matching fund or received a matching fund or contributed to the pool of matching funds or nominated a nonprofit. So we invited every donor, every nonprofit that had been nominated to come to a community lunch. And we heard such wonderful feedback from this convening. We did a community art project where people visualized the resilient valley that they want for our community. We had small breakout discussions where people turned in small groups of three and talked about what are some of the roadblocks that they're seeing. We had people eating lunch and reconnecting. A dear friend of mine came up afterwards and said, "Oh, it felt like before the pandemic. This was wonderful." I had another person come up and say, "Thank you. This was incredible. I was totally blown away by getting a match. But more importantly, I have made some connections from this, and it was really wonderful." Um, so the convening was also part of the coalition effort here, that we are stronger when we come together. We're stronger when we have places to celebrate. We're stronger when we have places to talk about what we really want for our communities. So I'm going to take a moment now just to tell you a little bit about the people who've given to the pool of matching funds, and then I'm going to turn it back over to Laura to announce the closing of our final round of this campaign. So, Laura, if you would go to slide 8, and I will just thank our pool of matching funds, and then I'll turn it over to you. So, in particular, I want to make a special shout out to our corporate funders who contributed above and beyond the individuals. Dean's Beans, a local business here in Western Massachusetts, the Community Foundation of Western Massachusetts, Franklin First Credit Union, Greenfield Savings Bank, and People's Bank. So thank you very much to our corporate sponsors for contributing to this pool and to all the individuals who also stepped up and gave anonymously and not anonymously. So Laura, over to you for the conclusion of the final leg of this campaign.
I'm just playing with the settings. So let's see, there we go. All right. So I hope it was clear to everybody. After feedback from donors and conversations, we decided to do it in a 6-month period because of the direness of the current situation and the funding cuts. So instead of giving a 12-month with 6 months in between, like half my DAF, that's why we went for the February and then again in May. The second thing that we did differently after talking to our donors and this area was to say, we want you to give more than you've done in the past. And we were hearing that giving out half was going to be too hard in the first year. So what we did is sort of looked at how much better are people doing in places like the stock market, and maybe saying, okay, could you do 10% more this year than last year? So that's what we aimed for. And we have a little checkbox on our pledge form that if donors give 10% more than they did in the past, then their gifts are eligible. So it's not perfect. There are donors who spend down every year and are probably checking the box that they did 10% more, and that's great. So we just want to again encourage the generosity and get things in the door. So in our first round, we were able to give away $74,600. There was over $220,000 worth of grants that had been submitted. And that was, I believe, 51 separate organizations or grants that were submitted in the first round. And we were able to give a pretty high percentage of those got funding. In this second round, I'm counting that we have over 151 nominations. 492,880 has been submitted in this current round, and I don't have all the numbers in yet, so that number is going to go up for sure. And of that, $230,680.36 is eligible for matches. We are matching dollar for dollar up to $5,000, so that's why there's that discrepancy between what was submitted and what we're able to match. I am also excited to say that our goal has been to raise $250,000, and we are just right at the $200,000 mark as of today. And we've got some outstanding asks that we think will get to our 250 by our event on May the 21st. So that will give us over $100,000 to be able to give away in this second round.
That's so exciting. That's fantastic news. And this is brand new news today because our deadline was May 2nd for people to submit. And Laura, I believe it was 20 minutes before this webinar that you finalized the tally. So thank you so much for that. It's
Yeah.
really exciting. When I first heard of the fundraising goal that we would collectively raise $250,000 for a pool of matching funds, I was not sure that was realistic. It's really fun to be at this moment. And I know we have Monica and Marty on the call in just a minute. If you want to put in some words about what your experience has been, I'm going to invite you to turn your camera on, and then I'll know you're up for talking. Great. Monica, would you please say in your own words what you experienced from being a part of the Resilient Valley Coalition and what it's meant to you?
Well, totally off the top of my head, I would like to say that there have been both personal benefits to me as a development director, and also I think so much of a benefit to the community. It's been really wonderful to work with other colleagues in a collaborative way. Excuse me, one second.
That's great.
Um, and it's been great to be able to share this with our donors and let them know that all of these nonprofits in the Valley are pulling together and supporting one another and really having these conversations with donors to help move more funding into the community to meet the needs these days. I feel like that's been a really widespread experience that those of us who's been working in the coalition over the last year have felt unanimous in what a great experience this has been. It's been collaborative, it's been mutually supportive, it's been fun, and we've had so many donors say thank you for doing this. So many people who it sort of felt like there was just there was a readiness for people to be asked, to help, to step up. And I think that's one of the great things about this collaboration is that we've tapped into that need and that desire to be more engaged and more generous, and that really seems to be working.
All right. Thank you. So, Laura, do you think we should do breakout rooms or wrap up? Where are we in terms of participation? And Marty, since you turned your camera on, I'm going to call on you after Laura answers the question of breakout rooms or no breakout rooms in just a minute. Just a minute.
I would say, since we're a smallish group, maybe we open it up for just questions.
Terrific. So, Marty, thank you. Would you introduce yourself, us who you are, and what, from your perspective, you have learned from this campaign?
I'm actually at an ultimate frisbee tournament besides, but I didn't know I was going to be here speaking with you all. So I'm a long time donor and a long time staff holder. So I've seen the value of it for many years. Um, and I've also seen that people have some in donor advised funds, and that, like you were all saying, it's not clear how to use it, or, gee, I got the tax benefit, but now I'm not sure who to give it to or exactly how to do it. So it was very important in our giving, my wife and my giving. So we felt as though, gee, there's so much that's not being used. This would be a motivation. And with the inspiration of the half my DAF, which seemed expensive to give so much all at once in one fell swoop, but still to increase giving because of the circumstances we're all in, it became sort of a no-brainer to say, hey, this is an opportunity. Let's see how we can encourage it. And so on the donor side of it, and then also on the giving side of it, um, it was something that made perfect sense. So I think it's been encouraging folks. I think there's still work to be done to motivate some of the donors that have donor advised funds that haven't been giving um, over time, and I think we're going to learn how to do that as we move forward, because this is going to be something I think that's going to be we'll have a bandwidth that can continue. I look forward to it. Thanks for being here.
So, Marty, the good news we're announcing today is that the Resilient Valley Coalition will do this campaign again next year. So we will on the 21st,
Yay, that's great.
on the 21st, we will announce who got their matches. We will distribute matching funds. We will convene another lunch. You're all invited to come join us in Holyoke, Massachusetts for a community lunch to celebrate. And then we will do this again next year. In light of this being Boston Climate Week, and this session in particular being held on Boston Climate Week, you might be asking, what does collaborative fundraising and supporting all the nonprofits in Western Massachusetts have anything to do with a climate solution? And we know that the climate is getting worse. It is having a bigger, harder impact on growing food, on being able to sleep well at night, of increased risk of heat stroke. We know that it impacts everybody, but it impacts everybody differently, that those who have the least amount of resources impact by the change in the climate even more. And that our solutions for how we support one another, how we show up and help each other, how we respond to this moment of a changing climate and have a resilient, vibrant, healthy community for everyone that's just and equitable, it's because all the nonprofits are working together, pulling together to build the kind of community we can all live and thrive in. And so the climate solutions are vast and varied. And the way we show up for one another is through coming together, not being split apart. And that is why this session, announcing that we're going to do this again next year, is being held on Boston Climate Week. And we are very grateful that you showed up here. And we're going to now turn it over to a conversation for those of you who are participating live, and those who are watching the recording, you're welcome to stay for the conversation. Feel free to unmute yourself, put your camera on, and let us know if you have any questions for our group.
And maybe our questions are, is this something that you all could see replicating elsewhere or putting your own spin to it? Because it doesn't have to be the same thing everywhere. I think the important thing has been the collaboration and jointly doing something that works in our community.
Can I just add that I don't think it was mentioned earlier that one model that we talked about early on was the Valley Gives online giving, which started here in 2012, and it's been done in many other cities and for a lot of small nonprofits, especially it was an opportunity sort of initiated and led by our community foundation to help practitioners in the field utilize the internet more in fundraising. But it was also a community collaboration with regard to having one central day when everyone was encouraged to give to so many nonprofits in the Valley, and there was a matching fund component to it. And I know that online giving, I mean, I think a lot of places have moved on to other things, but I know that kind of model for online giving days has happened in other parts of the state and other parts of the country. So I think that if, for others in, around Massachusetts, that's perhaps one way to think about it. If the community, like I believe Boston had a giving day, an online giving day, if there was any kind of infrastructure or sort of history for collaborating in that kind of way, that might be something to reflect on and to build on.
All right. Billy or Cassandra, do either of you have closing remarks, last words you want to share?
I would just add a couple of thoughts. I think one of the things that is really important about dealing with climate challenges is taking a systems view, and I think a lot of organizations and municipalities are doing that, and I think that's really what we've been trying to do here in the Connecticut River Valley, is to kind of recognize that the solutions we need for mitigating climate change, for being more resilient to climate change, we need that systems approach, and that means cutting across organizational boundaries, cutting across disciplines, really understanding, as Julie was saying, is how there's really so much connectivity between different issues. Climate is affecting farming, which is affecting food systems. It's affecting health. It's affecting needs for all kinds of services. And, we have this very rich nonprofit community in this region, and it's great, but there are a lot of separate organizations. And the only way we're going to have that kind of systemic collective impact is if we start to work together more. And, as usual, we're all, struggling to find the resources to do the work, and, approaching that collaboratively, I feel like has been a really powerful tool. And, I think that, sort of really about how the more community minded we can all be, the more connected we can be, the more relationships we can develop, the more collaborative we can be, the more community minded and the more generous we can be. That's how we're really going to make progress.
Mm.
I couldn't agree more, Billy. I mean, I think that the thing to remember here, as I'm sure you all know, is that we all have a role to play. And while the institutional leadership from our government at multiple levels might be dissipating right now, this is an opportunity for us to all step up, whether we're artists or we're scientists or we're nonprofit fundraisers or whatever role we fill in our community, to use that and to use our individual skill sets to bolster those around us and to join hands with our community members and find creative ways to tackle this, whatever that might look like for our particular communities.
Laura, Elizabeth, or Monica, last words? Any?
I'd just like to add that as a donor, it's really been inspiring for so many organizations to collaborate. As a donor giving to various organizations, to have this group collaborate together is really impressive and excellent for the Valley, because we can all do this together. And I think donors really appreciate that collaboration rather than trying to figure out, I'll give here, there, and everywhere. This collaboration is very valuable. I appreciate that a lot.
Mm.
I just wanted to say a quick thank you for having me, and I'm really grateful for all it is that you are able to do through coming together and having conversations around donor advised funds, and really helping us, reach this common goal of creating more movement in the space. So thank you, Julia and Laura, for all your work here.
And a huge thank you to you, Elizabeth, for joining us, for inspiring us, for cheering us on. I'm still like amazed at what we've done, you all, in like a very short amount of time. Like from October, we're like, oh, we're going to raise $250,000 and give it away, and we're doing it. We've given money away, but more importantly, we're also really thinking about how we, not just with the Match My DAF campaign, but what's our next iteration? Because this is just one campaign. So how does this group grow, as Billy said, our connective tissue, and what is the infrastructure that we need to keep this together? Because I saw at that lunch organizations who have never met from different parts or different sectors of the nonprofit getting to know each other for the first time, and that's one of the huge values of this is how we make sure that we support each other, is by knowing each other. So I look forward to wherever this takes us, and thank you to everybody for joining us today, and I hope you're inspired to do whatever makes sense in your own communities.
Thank you for joining us. And the website is in the resilientvalleyma.org is in the chat. Reach out to anyone through our website if you want to know more.